In this session, we are learning about one ratio fixed assets upon long-term fund. So, if you see the balance sheet of any company, okay, so in balance sheet, there is an asset, there is a liability, and assets. Okay. Now, in liability, there are long-term liabilities and short-term liabilities. Assets also, there are your fixed assets, then you have investments, then you have your current assets. Okay, so in this fixed assets and investments are your long-term assets. Okay, current assets are your short-term assets. Okay, now ideally speaking, your long-term liabilities, okay, should be able to fund your long-term assets, and your short-term liabilities should be able to fund your short-term assets. Okay, so the short-term liabilities means what? Current liabilities. So that is why while calculating working capital and all, we consider only current assets and current liabilities. So this is the ideal situation wherein your long-term liabilities should be able to fund your long-term assets, and your short-term liabilities should be able to fund your short-term assets. Okay. So it is expected that the fixed assets and core working capital are to be covered by your long-term fund. Okay, so in various industry, the proportion of fixed assets and current assets are different. Okay, so there is no uniform standard for this ratio. Okay, but usually fixed assets upon long-term fund should be equal to 1. So if you say your fixed assets upon long-term funds, okay, is 1. So what does that mean? Your fixed assets are equal to your long-term funds. So your long-term funds are able to fund your fixed assets. So say if it is more than 1, okay, so if it is more than 1, your fixed assets are more than your long-term fund. That means what? Your short-term funds are used to finance your fixed assets, which is not correct. Okay, your long-term funds should be able to cover your fixed assets. Okay, so let's see one example of this ratio. So this is a example in the books of XYZ Company Limited balance sheet as on 31st March 2017. You have particulars, current year amount. Then sources of fund. First is shareholders fund. You have 5 lakh, reserves and surplus 3 lakh. Then loans, you have secured loan, unsecured loan 2 lakh and 1 lakh. So total coming out to 3 lakh. So total of sources of fund is 11 lakh. Then you have application of fund, in that you have fixed asset, then gross block less accumulated depreciation, then you have net block of 4,50,000. Okay, then investments of rupees 3 lakh. Then current assets, loans and advances, you have inventories, sundry debtors, cash and bank balance, loans and advances of 1,75,000 less current liabilities and provision, in that you have sundry creditors and provision. So your net current assets or working capital comes to 3 lakhs. Then miscellaneous expenditure to the extent not written off is 50,000, and the total of application of funds is also 11 lakh. Now we will calculate our fixed assets upon long-term funds ratio. Okay, so fixed assets upon long-term funds. Okay, So what is the fixed assets here? Let's see. Fixed assets is gross block 6 lakh minus accumulated depreciation 1,50,000, net block 4,50,000. So we are considering fixed assets 4,50,000. Okay, net block WDV, written down value of fixed asset 4,50,000 upon long-term funds. Now what are long-term funds here? So long-term funds are shareholders fund 5 lakh, reserves and surplus 3 lakh, secured loan 2 lakh and unsecured loan 1 lakh. So 5 lakh plus 3 lakh plus 2 lakh plus 1 lakh. So you have 5 lakh plus 5 lakh plus 3 lakh plus 2 lakh plus 1 lakh. 5 lakh plus 3 plus 1 lakh. Correct? So 5 lakh plus 3 lakh plus 2 lakh plus 1 lakh. So that comes to 11 lakh. Okay. So it is 4,50,000 divided by 11 lakh. So how much does it come to? 0.91. Okay. So it is less than 1. So what does that mean? Your long-term funds are sufficient enough to cover your fixed assets. Okay. And short-term funds are not used to finance your fixed assets. So this is the ideal situation. And if you see, the ratio is 4091. That is, it is very less than 1. Okay. It is even less than 0.50. So less than 50%. So that means there are sufficient long-term funds to cover your fixed assets. Okay. So this is one of the coverage ratio. Okay. Or the ratio wherein you can find out your long-term solvency of the funds. Thank you.